When should I start? When have we started?
Yeah, we've definitely started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we've 100% started. So, is this going to come out tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. So, we have shows.
Oh, yeah, we do.
This is more important than silly communists.
True. We're going to talk about Marx and Engels and the Communist Manifesto, but first we'll plug our shows.
Right. So, we, as in Mr. X and I, although that's not what it's called, so if you look that up, you definitely won't find us. But we're playing a show at Mozart's Coffee Roasters in Austin. Tomorrow, this is Thursday, May 2nd at 4 p.m. And then Friday, May 3rd, we're playing at 5 p.m. at Celis Brewery in Austin, which is a fun spot. Right. They got cornhole, they got good beers and stuff.
Don't you mean Bago?
I don't know. I have no idea. I've never played it in my life. I only know it as cornhole. Throw your hat into the debate,
Antushka. Throw your hat into the debate. Actually, I think it's only where I grew up.
I think it's called Teabag.
I think, yeah, okay, come on. This is a family-friendly broadcast.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, no, most people call it cornhole. For some reason, where I grew up, they called it Bago. Or maybe it was just me.
It's just you. You're just putting it together. Like, you just made up a name for it.
Why the hell do I call it Bago? Somebody called it Bago.
That's funny. Does that count as swearing, what you just did?
What?
You said, why the hell do I call it this?
It was swearing in like 1950. I feel like that's okay now. We've degraded as a morally as a country.
Is it like if it would get bleeped out on the radio, you won't say it?
No, like I don't think that would get bleeped.
Right, that's what I'm saying. You're fine because it wouldn't get bleeped.
Yes, exactly.
All right,
we're good. Don't worry.
Okay, yeah. So we got two shows. May 2nd, Mozart's in Austin, Texas, which is a coffee shop, and they have delicious pastries and stuff. And then May 3rd, Celis Brewery.
Yeah.
Yep.
It could be fun. Yeah, it'll be good. And we may or may not talk about Foucault or Marx.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Actually, so that last Foucault episode we did is doing well on YouTube.
Nice.
Well for us.
I think I'm thinking that the YouTube algorithm, it has to do with volume because I was kind of behind, and so I posted 3 videos like right after each other. And I think I've noticed with YouTube, if you're very consistent with posting, it starts to boost your.
Yeah, I could see that.
It gets seen more. I don't know how popular it really was.
Oh, well, okay.
Did it get any comments?
No.
Yeah, okay.
But that's good.
Yeah,
we don't
that's
need
good.
those.
Yeah, we don't want it. Okay, all right. So the Communist Manifesto. I read the first 2. Well, I actually read the first 3 sections, but we're talking the first 2 today, right?
We're talking the first 2 today. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Cool. And I also listened to a bunch of lectures on it, and
yeah,
I spent a long time trying to figure out what Marx means by capital. Which took me forever, and I still only kind of get it.
I was just reading about that too, actually.
I was up till 1 a.m. last night. What does he mean?
Right.
And it's a dynamic thing. He doesn't mean one thing. And he has a positivist version of it and a critical version of it. Right. And it's what?
Yeah, I know. But simply, before getting into the process of what capital is, because that's the process of capital, like the extraction of capital from the labor.
Right.
But simply, though, he also does frame it as, money and then the means of production, probably more centrally.
Oh, interesting. I didn't find that one. I found the basic definition of Marx's most basic definition of capital is self-expanding value.
All right, I should find a quote. Yeah, I don't know if I have one handy though.
So my quotes from him on what capital is: capital is money on its way to becoming capital. That's one of his quotes, and then capital is the presupposition and result of production.
Yeah, so that's what I mean by I think he still does have the classical definition of capital. And by classical, I just mean when I think of classical, I think of cash, assets kind of thing.
Interesting. Because what I was reading is that he rejects that idea entirely.
Interesting.
When Marx says capital, it means something special that classical economists mean something completely different.
Yeah.
Because Marx thinks that they're short-sighted. Not that what they're saying isn't capital, but what they're saying is just a piece of it.
I don't know if he's rejecting it outright as much as saying it's also got it's more specifically has this process aspect to it.
Right. So an example was if you buy something expecting to sell it for a higher price, that is capital.
Yeah.
So if you buy a bag of chips and you eat them, it's not. But if you buy a bag of chips and then sell them for $1 more than you bought them, capital is the buying of the bag of chips, and the selling the bag of chips.
Interesting. Yeah, it's maybe that expansive aspect. But that's and this is interesting. I'm hoping that it'll get cleared, his theories will get cleared as we read on, because we'll do the third and then the fourth.
Right. So a thing that I was getting annoyed by reading the manifesto, and then I started listening to a lecture on it, which made a good point that this is a call for revolution. This is not a philosophical text.
Yeah, no.
So
that's
he's
a
not
great point.
rationally backing up his arguments very much. He's just asserting things to get people fired up.
Right. And I mean, I was going to say before we, I guess I want to say before we get too much more into the minutia, general impression. That was my first impression, was I can see how this is such a popular text because it is very compelling. He lays out a compelling historical narrative, right? And this is where we were, and this is where we are, and this is where we should be going. And he fires you up. You feel like you're on a team. Yeah, no. So, I mean, I could see why it's so popular.
Yeah.
But and to that point, it's very assertive. It's just a little bit frustrating. Even at one point, he's saying how I'm not even going to discuss the rebuttals to communism from the philosophical and religious and perspectives. And, that would be nice. But yes, to this teacher's point, that wasn't really their purpose. And it was published more historical information just to put a little bit of context into it, right? Because it's such an important piece of work, and it was published written in 1848.
1847. Published in 48, right?
Published in 48, written in 47, and this time period was just very important. It's a time period we've talked about previously. This was when Semmelweis was doing his work, and there was just a lot of societal change occurring.
Big political change, the borders shifting all over Europe.
Yeah, I mean, the Napoleonic Wars were within a generation. Right. Or their parents had experienced that.
Right.
So
Wisconsin became a state that year.
That's the biggest news. That's funny. Yep. Wow. Yeah. And I mean, there's just a lot going on, and Prussia wasn't a unified. Germany wasn't a nation state yet, right?
Right.
And Prussia wasn't unified. So it's just kind of, sorry, I just wanted to sort of share, just say some of those things.
Right.
And so Marx opens it up with this really interesting narrative again that he paints of how essentially the bourgeoisie, the history of I guess civilization is class struggle, and society today can be distilled into basically two classes: the proletariat and the bourgeoisie.
And today is in 1847.
Yes, as in 1848. We'll talk about what he was thinking about today later, I suppose. Right. But and then he paints this interesting picture that we've discussed previously in like Foucault and stuff of how you had a series of revolutions that led to this. You had the ancient ways got supplanted by the Christian ways, which got supplanted by the rationalist ways, which led to the bourgeoisie taking the power from the aristocracy. And so this revolution against the aristocracy and the landed royal gentry was in full throttle at this point, right?
Right.
And yeah, so I mean, it's just interesting. He talks about how you had the Italian nation states, which were really like the first kernels of the capitalists in Europe, like Vienna, and we've talked about that previously. Anyway, sorry. There was just a lot of interesting points, and this is what I mean why it was so compelling, because he writes this, he connects a lot of dots really well, I think. They do.
Right.
Well,
as in compellingly.
Yes.
Not as in correctly, I would say.
Well, he describes a lot of things that occurred, and that I think it is, maybe he hasn't arranged it how everybody would agree, but I think he makes a good point, and I think that progression is a pretty accepted progression. This is a progression that Nietzsche talks about too. Also, this is the interesting thing. It seems, I wonder if Nietzsche must have read this, but I kind of got a little bit of reminiscences of Nietzsche in this too.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because Nietzsche came 30 years later, right?
Right. It's interesting because
20 years later. 20, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know who did the translation into English. I think there's a note at the end of my copy that talks about that, but I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
But I guess I'm not getting, like, when I started reading this, I was like, oh, we've taken a big step down.
What do you mean?
In terms of...
Who's we and everything? Here?
We as in you and I in our reading have taken a big step down in terms of thought process. Because Nietzsche and Foucault's thought process is very complex and compelling and interesting. Yes. And this feels really stupid to me.
Take the gloves off, Andushka.
Not all of it. It's not that. It's more that it feels like it hasn't been, the writers have not taken the time to examine their own statements. And this is where, like, it's a call to revolution. That makes sense if the purpose of their statements is to make people start a revolution, it's less dumb. If it's trying to lay out a philosophy, it feels extremely incomplete.
Yes, right. So that's a great point, because his intention wasn't to lay out a philosophy, it seems. Right. I would agree with the teacher's point. However, it has certainly spawned a whole field of philosophy in many ways.
Absolutely. I mean, I can see where Foucault is taking from this. Right. And the critical theorists are clearly taking from this.
Yes. Yeah, we'll talk about his recipe for how to bring it about, right?
Right. I mean, to me, it sounds silly, but I guess it's sort of the heart of left-wing philosophy to reduce history to some kind of binary struggle.
But so I would have to push back. Maybe it's leftist now, but then I would say, what does that even mean? And I think the point is, everything seems to reduce to that, and this is what Hegel was pointing out, and this is goes to further. Marx was a young Hegelian. He was a philosophy PhD, right? So he was a student of Hegel, and he understood the dialectic very well, and he saw communism as the dialectic. I think, right. I'm assuming this is it, right?
I guess to me, it's not that isn't a useful way of looking at things sometimes.
So, and my point is, I think that Hegel's insight was that everybody sort of does that. So to say that the left reduces things to binary things, I would say everybody does that. We have a binary system of computing because it's so efficient, and I think it speaks to how our mind works is the point. But I'm sorry, I'm getting into very
I would say that
a
right-wing conception of history is unipolar almost. And a left-wing conception of history is a binary struggle.
I mean,
I
What
agree.
do you mean?
I
But,
agree
what
with your
about,
point about
like
left
the
and right are
right-wing-
not well-defined ideas.
And then what about like God and Satan? I mean, there's a binary in a lot of quote right-wing people. Obviously, this is what I mean. It's like, what is right-wing?
I don't know that I think that Christianity is particularly right-wing.
No, but this is why I was saying, what do you mean by left and what do you mean by right? And I don't know if this is worth. I mean, we can define it if we want, but my point is, in some conceptions of right wing, you would put the Christian conservative on that sign, right? And then you have the good versus evil kind of dynamic all over the place.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson talks about that. People certainly put him in that wing. Whether that's right or not, I don't know. That's why I think we could also just bog ourselves down by arguing about the definition of right and left wing. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense. Okay, so I would say that I don't think it's all conceptions of history that are binary struggles. I think there's also conceptions of history that involve sort of developmental trajectory. We're better now than we used to be. We used to be this, and now we're this. There's conceptions of history of cyclical events and things like that. I think that binary struggle is a way that a lot of philosophies like to distill history into. And then my personal thought is, why are you doing it? It goes back to the Nietzsche thing about what is the use of history. And then if you're doing that for a reason, and I want to know what your reason is.
Right. And so I think you're getting at, if I'm not mistaken, a very good point here that I detected from this. Mm-hmm. Is that it feels like he just wants power.
Right. No, I know. There's one point, I want to find it, where it's like he's got a great little, I think it's the end of, is it the end of the second chapter? Yeah. So he's got a great little get out of jail move for the proletariats, because the proletariat class is going to take power, but they will not become their own form of the bourgeois. They will not become their own form of sort of illegitimate bad power. Because basically, what I read this as, bourgeois bad, proletariat good. Mm-hmm. And so, political power, properly so called, this is a quote now, is merely the organized power for one class, the organized power of one class for oppressing another. So that's political power. If the proletariat, during its contest with the bourgeoisie, is compelled by force of circumstances to organize itself as a class by means of a revolution, it makes itself the ruling class, and as such sweeps away by force the old conditions of production. Then it will, along with these conditions, have swept away the conditions for the existence of class antagonism and classes generally, and will thereby have abolished its own supremacy as a class.
Yeah,
nice.
I underlined the same thing, actually.
It's like, sweet.
And with a question mark of like, how the hell do you know that's going to happen? You've just created a new class called the ruling class.
No, because they've gotten rid of classes. No, they're fine.
No, but yes, right. You're being tongue-in-cheek, obviously. But that's the thing is, yes.
Well, that's what he's saying, essentially.
Right, and that was my big question, though, is because,
So to me, it's either he's just not being particularly self-reflective on his own ideas, or he's ignoring glaring issues on purpose.
Right.
Or he's too dumb, but I don't want to take that route.
No, I mean, this is the problem, is especially now that you mentioned that lecture, it's like I just keep thinking that, so now you can just have a get-out-of-jail-free card whenever there's an idea that's not presented very well and be like, well, he didn't have time to go into that detail. This wasn't the point. It was just to rile people up. It's like, well, okay. I guess he did end up getting kicked out of Berlin after like 2 years after this. So, I guess he reaped the...
Right. I mean, this is the thing is he has other texts that are much headier.
Right.
Like I've tried to get through some of them. They're tough, like Das Kapital and stuff.
Right.
They're tricky. I mean, it's a little bit like reading Foucault, but it's even denser in a weird way.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Like his thing on capital, it's just like it boggles my mind. It's really hard for me to. I think he means many different things by the word, which makes it very hard to understand what he means. Because I got stuck on this passage. Let's see if I can find it, where he's talking about wage labor.
Yeah.
Here we go. So, let's see. Okay, so he's talking about private property. And it's this weird thing. It's like I was kind of stuck on this whole thing. So he's saying that in the proletarian society, there will be private property, just not bourgeois private property. And I had a very hard time understanding specifically what bourgeois private property is. But I'll just go through this section. I mean, maybe you had a better idea.
Oh, what bourgeois private property is the means of production, I thought.
Right. Yeah. That's basically what I think it is. So there will not be means of production, or there will not be ownership of means of production, because I thought the proletariat does own means of production. The laborer owns means of production.
Yeah, sorry, I'll let you continue reading.
Okay, anyway, so we communists have been reproached with the desire of abolishing the right of personally acquiring property as the fruit of a man's own labor, which property is alleged to be the groundwork of all personal freedom, activity, and independence. So the communists have been accused of that, and the retort is that private property is the groundwork for personal freedom, which is in line with like what we've read from Rothbard and Rose Wilder Lane and stuff like that.
And Locke. I mean, It was probably Locke was the one that really codified that.
Right. Interestingly, Locke and Marx, I was reading, are considered to be in line with each other philosophically.
So
on
I
private
kind of
property.
I can't see that. I can see it on the freedom, because Marx mentions how ultimately this kind of is about freedom of conscience and, expression. Like,
yeah. Oh, right. The conscience. Like, I had a question for you on that. But so continuing, hard-won, self-acquired, self-earned property. He's being sarcastic here. Do you mean the property of a petty artisan and the small peasant, a form of property that preceded the bourgeois form? There is no need to abolish that. The development of industry has to a great extent already destroyed it and is still destroying it. Or do you mean the modern bourgeois property? But does wage labor create any property for the laborer? Not a bit. It creates capital, i.e. that kind of property which exploits wage labor and which cannot increase except upon conditions of begetting a new supply of wage labor for fresh exploitation. Property in its present form is based on the antagonism of capital and wage labor.
Yeah.
Let's see, what are my notes on this? Because this is where I got hung up, and then I took a sidetrack to read about what Marx says about what capital is.
Can you read that?
Because I have a couple questions. One question is what other types of labor are there besides wage labor? And then I thought slavery and volunteer, maybe?
Yeah. Well, and again, my understanding of labor generally is in this context just the ability to make capital, essentially.
Which is?
Which are goods, I guess.
That's what I'm saying. Make what?
Yeah.
What are we talking about? To make self-expanding value.
Yeah, I think so. Because, I mean, that was an interesting thing, and we'll talk about the tenants, I hope. But, you know, the tenants have a thing about increasing goods.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. I don't know what the other types of labor would be. But it's true. I mean, he has interesting things about the private property, because later he talks about, you are horrified at our intending to do away with private property, but your existing society, private property is already done away with for 9/10 of the population. Its existence for the few is solely due to its non-existence in the hands of those 9/10.
Right.
So I thought that's kind of a compelling point, especially in today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like...
No,
it's
I know it's a commonly thought point, but I don't.
Right.
I disagree 100% with it.
No, I do too, but the point of the fact that we are always, it is this internal desire or hope that you would one day have property and stuff like that, but it doesn't mean that you'll get it. So we have this...
Right.
Yeah, it's all about hope, and it's exploiting hope in some ways is
right. But this is the thing. This is my problem with this entire line of thinking. There is definitely inequality in our current society. There was definitely inequality in the 1840s, but it isn't. If you look to the states that took on this idea of communism, it wasn't like there was less inequality. And the idea of private property existing, there was more existence of private property in 1848 than there was in 1448.
Yeah, I don't know, actually. It's a...
Because in a system of serfdom, the only people who own private property, like private property truly, would be the monarchs, and then the system of property ownership is less strong with the lords and even less strong with the knights, and with the serfs it is completely non-existent. And so he's painting that same picture for the bourgeois, factory owners and stuff like that. But it is more distributed in the 1840s than it was 300 years prior to that. In like the 1500s in England. Not that it's perfect, not that it's like distributed perfectly evenly, but to me that is the idiocy of this entire line of thinking, to think that you are going to end up with, or you would even want, a system of perfect property distribution.
It's an interesting point, because I think the reason I'm having a hard time thinking about it is because it gets into this whole thing of how private property wasn't really a concept for a long time. Mm-hmm. So to even discuss its historical use is kind of difficult, because it's like they weren't really thinking about private property in 1414 in the same way that we are now. But your point is taken in that the proportion of people, more people probably did have private property in 1848 than 1448. And having a equal distribution of private property is probably not reasonable. Right. This is essentially what you're saying, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, but, and this is, I guess, just why communism is so... Sorry, I'm, really in my head on this episode. I don't know if you could tell, and now I just got to just say it, because I feel like an idiot because I repeated that text.
It's fine.
I'm off my game.
It doesn't matter.
I'm off my game.
Anyway. I'm all fired up.
You are. This is good. I'm actually kind of trying to take a back seat on this, because I feel like you are fired up, and you're doing a good job, so...
I'm doing a good job. I mean,
you are.
I think that I half regret my statement about it being stupid. I don't actually think Marx is stupid. I just think that the way that we attack this text has to be slightly different than like a philosophical treatise.
Yes.
But I also feel, because of what this text is, I feel comfortable sort of battling it more aggressively.
Yeah, that's good. I don't really feel comfortable because this is the first time I've really started to read about this stuff, to be honest. I'm a little bit, sorry to say that.
Wait, what?
Well, I feel like I should be more knowledgeable about this sort of political science stuff because it's so influential and it underpins all of the politics that we talk about. I mean, everybody's talking about communism and fascism and whatever.
Well, we should read that next, the manifesto there. Why not?
Exactly. Well, yeah. But, yeah, I think, I think the general point that he makes a lot in this is another, I think, good one, is that capitalism does create much more upheaval and fast cycles than the old ways of doing things. I think that's actually a very good observation that he made. And I think that explains the exponential growth that we've experienced since the Industrial Revolution, which essentially coincided with the adoption of capitalism.
Right. And what would you say is meant by capitalism in that sense?
Well, I would say the formation of the organization, the company is a big thing, part of that. And so the formation of the board and these large international companies that begin doing business across the globe.
Right.
And sort of become nations in themselves.
Right.
Which, again, was beginning to take its roots in the 15th century.
It doesn't seem to me... So when I read what Marx says what a capitalist is, that doesn't seem like something that started in the 1700s. Because he says a capitalist is someone who uses the production of goods.
Well, I just told you, he doesn't think that, though. Like, he points to like I said, Venice and during, like, Leonardo da Vinci's time in the 1400s as an example of an early example of a city-state of capitalists that were beginning to consolidate power and fight against the aristocracy. And, I mean, this is where, we didn't read that, but this is actually one of the very interesting things that the Machiavellian's book by James Burnham opens with, is Machiavelli's writing Dante is writing a letter to the Holy Roman Emperor to try to get his defense from the Pope. Anyway, but the point is that, it's to Marx's point, you had this class of bourgeois people, that were starting to consolidate power and try to exert it, and they were playing political games too.
Right.
And during his time, they were essentially becoming the big titans of industry. You had Vanderbilt, and you had Rockefeller and all of them to come. So,
right. Maybe I'm misunderstanding Marx. I understand him as saying that the rise of capitalism comes with the rise of industry.
I mean, sure. I think it probably was mostly enlarged in then, which was the 1700s. But I'm just telling you that it has its antecedents, as everything does.
Right.
And he discusses those antecedents, too.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't seem to me to be a thing that started at any time. Like, it seems to me to be something that anybody at any point in history might start doing.
Yes. Well, the Phoenicians, right?
Or whatever. So a capitalist is someone who uses the production of goods as a way to expand value.
Right.
Everybody does this.
Yes.
But he makes a distinction, which I don't fully understand. He says he's not talking about a merchant. He's not talking about somebody who just sells goods, but somebody who makes goods in order to sell goods at a profit.
I think you're being too specific, though, here, because he's talking about the general. My understanding is when the bourgeois have taken over, they've taken over at this point. That's the defining distinction from other times. Yes, probably capitalists, and again, he points to them in many different times, existed all over history. But it wasn't until this time that they've actually succeeded in becoming the major power that are driving society. And so he's pointing to this one thing, like I said, that I think is actually a very good point, that, and then his reasoning for why it occurs is that you have rapid cycles of sort of growth and collapse in the capitalist frame, and rapid cycles of basically class aggression.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it does just seem like that has happened. There's everything has exponentially increased since the 18th century. And yes, it's one big thing that changed during that time was you had, like I said, the dominance of the capitalists at that point. So there's a lot of good that came from it that I've also in previous episodes pointed to. So I'm not saying it's all bad, but I think, I think the case could very well be made that, and this is the case that Marx makes, that the constant recycling of the proletariat, so you're constantly developing, the capitalist needs to develop, this is what's causing the cycles. They need to develop new technology to stay competitive. And then the labor's constantly having to learn new technology, so the labor's constantly being recycled. And so this is creating constant strife because you have, people being churned into this machine where all of a sudden their labor is no longer worth what it is, and then the new people come in.
But this also has this weird assumption that a laborer can also not engage in development, because that is the revolution of private property, and this is where I disagree fundamentally with Marx.
I don't think it assumes that, because he sort of, in my opinion, addresses that point when he's discussing how the bourgeois class, just like the proletariat, is constantly being resupplied and then also expended. People are constantly shuffling into the bourgeois and then shuffling out of it.
Right,
and
but
that's
what
I
private
think
property does is I think he's wrong. I don't think that there is a bourgeois and a proletariat in a system of true free market and private property. I'm not saying in 1848 or today.
So you're an anarcho-communist, is what you're telling me.
Maybe no. I think that the world he's painting isn't real.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you for a little bit. I'm just kind of pushing back because it's fun, first off, and
well, I mean, maybe you disagree with me too. I don't know.
No, I mean, I'm just trying to push back with what my understanding of the text was and how.
I see. Yeah. Right. No, I think you're right about what he's saying for sure.
Oh yeah, and then I do have the point that I would agree with, that the capitalism does make cycles very quickly, and it's a good and bad. It's a double-edged sword. It leads to rapid technological development, which is what we've essentially seen over the last 200 years. But it has the added downside that we've also had the biggest wars with the biggest casualty numbers. It's exploded our population, but has also exploded the
But what does
atrocities.
that have to do with capitalism?
Because it's been the engine of development.
But the wars, I don't think, have anything to do with development.
It's the point that capitalism has allowed for greater population growth because of the advancement in technologies like agriculture and everything like that. And so when you just have more people and you have wars, more people are going to die, I guess.
Right, but like the world wars, I would attribute to massive ideological shift out of a monarchic system into essentially a socialistic system.
Well, into both. The dialectic. You had the socialist system
World War II
in
was the
Russia.
death blow to all monarchic power in Europe.
No, but I would say that in the West, the capitalists won the day after World War I and II.
I don't see any capitalists in those wars at all.
Well, you should read the Devil's Chessboard.
Sure. I see socialists versus monarchists, essentially. Who are the capitalists?
The capitalists are
not the U.S.,
United
not
Fruit.
Britain,
Yes,
not
I mean
France.
there was a lot of businesses behind the scenes that were trying to make sure that their assets weren't dissolved as the political systems were crumbling beneath them. So, in the after World War II, I mean, this is what a lot of people say the CIA developed to protect the business interests of people like United Fruit.
Right. But I don't think all business or anybody with a lot of money, that's not what defines you as a capitalist. Being rich.
No,
like
it's the means of production. It's the means of production. And so they were defending the means of production in places like Cuba when you had, the communists trying to seize the modes of production. So my point is, you saying that socialism won the day after World War I and II is just, in my opinion, flatly wrong. It was a two-world, a bipole, a dialectic world that created. You had the communists / socialists, whatever, from seated in Russia and China, etc. And then you had the West, which was the capitalist world.
I see the West after World War II as wildly socialist.
It was beginning to become socialist, but the capitalists, I think, have still held power. But you're right. Yes, I mean FDR.
Because the progressives had already taken over. Woodrow Wilson, FDR, the whole thing had already happened in the U.S.
Yeah, but you still have. I think that now, only now, are we seeing. This is where I'm granting you. I think now we're actually seeing the world shift into, at least in the West, a more socialist or communist perspective or regime, and we can get to that when we read the tenets and how a lot of them apply to today.
Oh yeah,
I agree with you.
Which ones I've already had?
Yes, and I agree with you that. All I'm saying though is I don't think that in the West I think the bourgeoisie, essentially, as Marx would describe them, still had the most of the power.
Sure. Okay. So where I will I'm being very broad with how I'm using socialist. So maybe I'm being unfair.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, socialism and communism different. Marxism.
So I think that the U.S. and the Soviet Union were opposed to it. Like the end of the war ended with a sort of a bifurcation of those poles. And when you say capitalist in the United States, I don't think that there was anything even close to free market capitalism. And Marx makes some point about free market. So I guess I don't know whether he's talking specifically about free market capitalism, because what I see in the U.S. in the teens all the way until now is a form of capitalism, if you were to call it that is, like crony capitalism is a word that people like to use, is very wealthy people are given a lot of power and funding and money and protection from the government, like you're saying, the CIA. To me, that's oligarchy, which is not really what I think of when I think of like the freewheeling capitalism, because I feel like Marx is talking about these business interests run amok. And I think that that's true. The business interests have run amok, but it isn't because of their of those business interests' specific exploitation of the proletariat. It's because they are given oligarchic status from the people with the power of the purse and the army.
I think you make a good point.
And so
We're not-
then,
yeah.
and then I'm saying there's where it's like, well, what do we mean capitalist?
Right.
Because we don't
Yes,
mean
exactly.
like free market private property.
No. Because I mean, that's the thing is even in Marx's time, the capitalists were being assisted by
Right.
certain
Right.
nobles and stuff. I mean, they had to get their money to begin with from the nobles, of
Right.
course, and property rather.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, Marx discusses this, right? Obviously, some nobles became the capitalists, and
Right.
so I think your point is well taken that what sprouted wasn't a pure capitalist free market in the West after the World Wars. But I guess maybe what I'm getting at is on the spectrum of collectivism versus individuality, which is kind of essentially how I think about these two things, socialism and capitalism. Then the West has still skewed more towards the capitalist side post the World Wars. But now,
I agree.
but now is actually starting, I think, to skew more towards the socialist side.
I mean, it's tough because we don't have a barometer now, like with respect to who? Because there isn't a USSR we're fighting.
With respect to, yeah.
Because I don't know,
Only.
because it's hard with China, because I'm not there, and I feel like it's hard to get good information. I don't know what it's like in China for real.
I think with respect to the monopolies and their maybe entrenchment and
Right.
kind of to your point, their collusion with the government, you know, like even Standard Oil was fighting with the government more than you see the big monopolies of today. They're all the monopolies of today that exist because they're highly they work with the government, right?
Yes.
Whereas in some ways they should be fighting each other.
Right. But this is where I'm saying I don't know what this world he's talking about is. Who are these capitalists who are doing all this great competition stuff? Because that sounds great to me. I'd love to see that world.
Well,
I see oligarchs. I see
Well-
essentially an extension of the feudal system.
You're saying you see that in 1848, or you see that now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that from my perspective, the period in the U.S. at least that has the greatest level of free market capitalism, which is still not perfect by any means, is the post-Civil War, like 1870 through 1910.
Yes, the Gilded Age.
Not that it is perfect by any means, because there's all the railroad grants and land grants in Oklahoma and stuff. Like, it's crazy how much government interference there was even then. But
Well, so a couple things there, because again, I feel like I'm having a hard time understanding what you're saying, because it's like Marx isn't talking about the 1870s, of course.
no, I'm saying that what I'm saying is I
so
don't
when you
know
say- but-
what
yeah.
Marx. So when he says, I'm hung up on the word capitalist. I'm being I'm being my autistic self.
Yeah.
But I think with Marx, it's important because he's got a whole freaking book on it.
Yeah.
He writes hundreds of pages on what he means, and I don't think he means a damn thing.
I know. Why do I always get in the frickin' standpoint of having to defend these people from you?
You're like, hey, be nice.
Yeah, be nice to old Marx, you know?
And then Engels, don't even get me started on that guy.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Anyway, we can get off this. It's fine.
Yeah, I don't know how much more we'll get out of it right now. I think maybe I'll have more to say about it when we read on. So, yeah, because I mean, it has been an hour, and we should talk about, I think, the tenets.
Sure.
So he offers a recipe in true manifesto style of how to bring about a communist revolution.
A little cookbook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, number 1, abolition of property and land and application of all rents of land to public purposes.
So what I did when I read this list is I highlighted in yellow everything that I think has already happened, and in green everything that I think is in the process of happening.
Yeah. So would you highlight that as green?
Process.
Yeah. Okay. A heavy progressive or graduated income tax.
They did it. Hooray.
Yeah.
Good job, guys.
Abolition of all rights of inheritance. They
Green.
just green. I mean, they just raise the estate tax?
Yep. And then
Yeah.
they want to make an unrealized gains tax. I think they're trying to put that through.
Oh, yeah.
That's nice money you haven't even made yet.
Yeah, that's good. Confiscation of the property of all emigrants and rebels.
I don't think they've done that.
Yeah.
I don't have that one highlighted.
Yeah. I mean, they confiscated Russia's assets, of course, when they invaded Ukraine, but, that's understandable.
Right.
Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly, of course.
We didn't read anything like that recently.
No, we didn't. Centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state.
Certain states have done that better than others. In the U.S., they're not as good at that one.
It's interesting you say that because I feel like they do have it centralized. Because first off, all of the utility poles that the internet, at least that the phones ran on, were public. I mean, this Bell AT&T was a public utility. I guess
I think they've done it somewhat. I don't think, but in terms of transport, most Americans still own cars and kind of choose the direction they go, choose their paths, things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands, and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with a common plan. I mean, that's a very specific one.
I think they did it.
Well, I don't know. Why do you say that?
So maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but if we go through the pieces, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. So the state has, through through two methods, I think, taking control of production, like factory-based production, either through taking over and regulating and taking over many production industries, through outsourcing production with trade agreements, and with through union-based systems, union labor, public unions and private unions.
Right. So I see your point, but it's not outright ownership, right?
Sure. Yeah. That's true. That's fair. Bringing into cultivation of wastelands. I don't exactly know what that means literally.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was saying it's kind of funny because it gets very specific because it's and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with a common plan.
And then I just take our agricultural laws that if I take it more broadly, we have extremely tight regulation on agriculture and also strange monetary incentives for certain types of agriculture.
Monocrop.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Equal liability of all to labor, establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture.
So what does that mean to you? I don't fully understand that one either. Equal liability of all to work. So everybody has to work, otherwise they're going to be in trouble. Everybody stands to lose equally from not working. Mm-hmm. Which I don't think.
Yeah, and also they have liability. Everybody is liable for labor. Everybody is on the hook for labor, for the labor that's done. Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I read it.
I think this is part of why in North Korea and in the Soviet Union, they treated not working very harshly, and there were plenty of homeless people. There was no qualms about sending people out on the street and essentially kicking them out of the union if they wouldn't labor. And that's still a thing in Europe. It's this crazy thing where, if you talk to people from Germany, They're like, why are these homeless people not in jail? And like people who don't pay their taxes, of course they can't get health care. Like it's crazy to think that everybody deserves health, like immigrants deserve health care and stuff.
I think that squares in my head, though. I mean, I don't want to get too off on it, but yeah, I mean, going to the old world thinking versus new world, Rosewater Lane stuff, how I feel like people that stayed in Europe are probably generally less individualistic than those of us in the new world.
Right.
And they still have the old, like we used to think of ourselves as tribes and not individuals of a group, not individuals, but rather a section of a group, and that's how we waged war, etc.
Right.
The tribes of ancient Goth and Gaul.
Right.
Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so
and then the
9.
industrial armies, is that unions? I don't know.
I thought it was just large groups of people mobilized to make things.
Sure, maybe.
But I don't know. Yeah, and especially for agriculture. So it's just meaning you need a lot of people doing that, probably. Number 9, combination of well, you want to read the... Sorry, I've been hogging.
Go for it.
No. You sure? Okay.
Yeah.
Number 9, combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries. Gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country. See, I don't think that's...
Subdivisions?
But in terms of equitable distribution over the country, this is actually an interesting point I was thinking about. Because, I mean, we have these mega cities now that exist. So I don't know how equitable it actually is. I mean, there's still large areas that aren't.
I mean, we don't really have mega cities in the U.S., do we?
Well, compared to 500 years ago, right?
Oh, fine. Yeah. But like Mexico City, Tokyo, Seoul.
Yeah, but I mean, New York City is a big city. The point is the population centers. If you were to take the area of the U.S., most people live in centralized locations. It's not really distributed evenly.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying I don't know if that's necessarily happened.
Sure. Yeah, maybe not.
Abolition of the distinction between town and country. That I could see happening. I mean... I
feel like it is happening. That is the subdivision expansion thing.
Well, I meant also. Well, what do you mean by that?
So I think it is that sort of everywhere is sort of equally covered in, like pre-made apartment buildings, kind of a thing.
Yeah, but. I guess I thought he was talking more about abolishing the borders of these places, which is what he means, distinction between town and country. So, and I was saying I do see that happening because, like, compared to myself, compared to my parents, compared to their parents, I think the news I ingest is much less local than it used to be.
Sure.
And I'm thinking about national politics rather than local politics as much as I should be. And that's what I took it to me.
Right.
I don't know. Do you see that?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I can see how that might mean that.
Okay.
I guess I don't fully understand. I don't read it and I go, I know exactly what that means. So.
Yeah. Number 10, free education for all children in public schools. Abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, combination of education with industrial production, et cetera, et cetera.
Nice. Yeah. Free education. Such a stupid idea.
Says the man who was homeschooled.
No, it's just there's no such thing as free anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody's putting in effort. Somebody's expending calories,
Sure. Although energy can't be created or destroyed, man, so we're all just funneling it, man.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Right, yeah, equality already exists, Marx.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't even want to say too much because I feel like I want to read more before I start to really dig into it.
Right.
But I do have a lot of thoughts.
What was his conscience point? That was the one I actually wanted to ask you what you thought about it.
I also underlined that.
Here we go.
The ideas of religious liberty and freedom of conscience merely gave expression to the sway of free competition within the domain of knowledge. Sorry, I read that. Yeah, but that's the quote.
Oh, that's not even what I was.
Oh,
that's
really?
not even what I highlighted.
Oh, well, what'd you highlight?
The charges against communism made from a religious, a philosophical, and generally from an ideological standpoint are not deserving of serious examination.
Yeah.
Does it require deep intuition to comprehend that man's ideas, views, and conception, in one word, man's consciousness, changes with every change in the condition of his material existence, in his social relations, and in his social life? So what do you think? How would you answer that question?
Well, this is getting, I underlined the same thing, and I'm glad we're talking about this, because this is essentially what you, I think, had an issue with Mark and me talking about the patent stuff, right? Because he's getting at this idea that your mind is dependent on the material existence in society. It's like you are a product of your environment, and that's why labor is inherently social. He goes on to talk about that, I think.
I mean, he talks about social labor a lot, I think social labor is another word for slavery.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah.
The idea that you do not own your own labor, that society owns your labor.
Right.
Yeah.
We could get into a whole thing.
Right.
But yeah, in terms of this, I think that's what he's saying, is that your consciousness is shaped and your mind is shaped by society.
Well, part of it is that so I feel like you have a very physiological definition of consciousness. And he says your consciousness is your ideas, views, and conceptions.
Yeah, it's just your brain. That's all he's saying.
Yeah, right.
It's how you perceive the world. That's what I read it as,
But I agree with him. Obviously, your perception is different. It changes all the time based on your social situation. Your it changes based on if you're hungry or not.
Yeah. So if you read on, he goes on, and it's interesting because I feel like Mikel makes this same point from the Machiavellian's book. Mm-hmm. What else does the history of ideas prove than that intellectual production changes in character and proportion as material production has changed? The ruling ideas of each age have ever been the ideas of its ruling class.
Right, maybe, yeah. I mean, that line hit me. I remember I've been thinking about that particular statement all day.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's essentially what Mikel's talking about. That's why, if
it's very Foucault also.
Right, and if you want to understand society, you have to study the ruling class of the society.
Right. It's very not Thaddeus Russell.
Yeah, no, and that's where some of this underlining, it seems like Marx is really just, he wants power. Because he kind of, even when he's talking about the old ways, and I guess I think it was in quotes, but it's like when the, quote, natural rulers of men were sort of pushed aside by the bourgeoisie. So the way he said it, though, made it feel like he's like, those were the days when the true rulers of people existed. And so that's the thing, is he doesn't really go into detail of who are these people that are supposed to decide. And that's always the issue that I feel like everybody has to overcome when they actually try to make a communist revolution. It's, well, who are the people that are in positions to decide what happens? Because those people inevitably become a class. And they're
not
separate.
If you do it right, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. But obviously, it's like,
right.
Yeah,
but the other thing is that I think the way it will always fail. This is this thing where people say communism is great on paper. I think it's dumb on paper too. I think it's as dumb on paper as it is in real life. As he gives no agency to the proletariat. It's all the bourgeois. It's this. This is where it's the same as critical theory. It's the same as modern woke movements. It's the oppressed people have no age. They're just acted upon. And so by the bourgeois doing what the bourgeois do, it creates more proletariat just naturally and will induce a revolution. It's all just the bourgeois are the only ones doing anything.
Well, no, I mean, the aristocracy and the nobles were doing things too. But he makes this point, actually, that the bourgeois give the proletariat the means to do things. They educate them. And this kind of gets at Foucault's point of, what is it, the biomass or whatever it was. Yeah. He had a term for what the capitalist society does to the humans. Again, that whole philosophical shift of actually... pro-life, trying to make it so that not pro-life in the abortion sense, but like want your constituencies to survive because then they can be good consumers. Yeah, I don't know. So that's always the thing. Yeah, I always have to square with this is just how much better people's lives have become. And so that's the interesting thing.
Well, he's saying they're way worse. Like, if you read him, it's like people's lives are just continuing to get worse and worse and worse.
Right. And I actually underlined that as like, that actually was probably true at his point. Because, again, you did have horrific labor conditions in the 1840s. But you...
but, like, nobody was writing about labor conditions in 1620. Like,
No, and I was also just about to say... I say things are so good, but is it just that we've abstracted ourselves away from those conditions because now those conditions exist in countries abroad, and so they're not in the cities anymore. Because
we're the bourgeois for sure.
Because we're the bourgeois, exactly. We're the bourgeois, Antushka.
Definitely. I mean, 100%.
Damn
no question.
It. We've become what we hate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Call me Ishmael.
Yeah, right.
Are you exhausted?
No, I can keep...
It took me a while to warm up into
day.
this one. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just being dumb and spouting my mouth off. It's possible.
No, it's just more of like, it just took me a sec. I was like, I think I just said a few dumb things at the beginning and I got in my head.
Wait, did you? What? You didn't say anything dumb?
I don't know. Again, I'm just getting in my head.
The only thing dumb is that social labor is a reasonable concept.
So it's interesting. I was listening back to one of the Elite Atrophy episode.
Wait, what's that?
So it was our one on Pareto and like his residuals and all that stuff.
Okay. Wow, I don't even remember this.
It was the Machiavellians, Defenders of Freedom.
Oh, those made me all depressed. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And I had a point I wanted to make. Why did I bring this up? Well, it's just so we were making the point of how like the foxes were in I was trying to make the point that the foxes are in power now, and I think you were sort of like basically well, I'm just rehashing the episode.
Nice.
You were basically saying like, well, it seems like this is a pattern that occurs often in history, and like you could say this is happening at any time, but I don't know, it just seems like we're more and more I don't know.
Wait, more foxes than ever?
No, we're at the precipice of something.
Oh. Yeah, maybe. But I mean, I think stuff is changing, and
do you feel like the intensity is ratcheted up?
What?
Do you feel like the polarity or the rhetoric has ratcheted up?
The rhetoric
significantly in the last like 2 weeks. I don't know. I just feel like things are even more heated.
I think the rhetoric has ratcheted down, and I think that the actual changes have ratcheted up.
Oh yeah, people are acting now.
I think like there's weird new laws coming, like real laws coming through from the federal government a lot now.
Yeah.
But nobody's talking about it. I think that there is no rhetoric, but the rhetoric's just about Palestine.
Yeah, but I think that's sort of manifesting the underlying distress in the proletariat, if you will.
Yeah.
That's what I
think.
mean.
I think I saw. It's pretty funny. I saw a Charlie Kirk clip, but I thought he was making a very good point. It's just the students on campus, and he was talking about essentially how the Democrats and the left they're not for the proletariat. They use the proletariat to give them cover, but they're all oligarchs. And how 9 out of 10 of CEOs in the country are Democrats, like true blue Democrats.
And
all the wealthiest counties in the country all donate and vote Democrat. And it's like the people with all the money are the ones who weaponize like stupid leftist students, and those students give them cover and will perpetually vote for them and bully other people out of speaking against it and stuff like that.
Right, this is going back to that Pareto episode, because he talks about this perverse humanitarianism that class 2 residues, which are the foxes, which are basically deceptive people who end up coming into power during essentially the last stage of a society before a cycle occurs, some kind of probably conflict occurs,
right?
Where then the class 1 residues, lions, will take power again. And one of the things I thought it was funny, he talks is it's like deranged humanitarianism, and it's humanitarianism that is used to mask underlying deception.
Right.
And
sure, absolutely.
And it's also funny because Marx essentially makes this point about the bourgeois, who I think we would say are these people, the Democrats, in this case, the wealthy Democrats, rather, that run the party. Because, he talks about how the bourgeois essentially use the proletariat to fight other groups. So that's exactly it. So
I think that
Charlie Kirk agrees with Marx is the point. That's what I'm saying.
When I was reading this, so for me to give Marx a little bit of his due, Marx and Engels, when I was reading it, his description of the use of the proletariat by the bourgeois and the what's the word? Abuse is the wrong word. I don't know. Yeah, I guess the abuse of power by the bourgeois feels very much like certain dynamics that exist in our society. I don't think the dynamics he's talking about are not real. I think that dynamic very much exists, but I think that the students aren't really the proletariat that he's talking about. I think the thing is, in our current society, laborers are completely out of the picture. It's like we're talking about everybody's bourgeois. It's just different levels of bourgeois.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point.
Or like ruling class, like oligarchs. Like I would consider it more closer to a feudal system.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think your point, like certainly the people at Columbia, I think many of them
laborers.
Well, I mean, but it's a good question though, because you also have a lot of people there from underrepresented backgrounds who are there potentially from countries where, like we're talking about, the labor is.
I mean, not a lot. A place like Colombia is vastly overrepresented by wealthy people from other countries too, but students of wealthy people.
I wonder, because I mean, I think you might be surprised by how much the demographics have changed in universities.
Yeah, maybe. Especially I don't know. When I've looked into it, I think especially the Ivies especially.
It's especially since 2020.
Yeah, maybe. It's true.
And I'm not saying this is a bad thing, by the way.
Right. I'm not saying it's a bad thing either. I don't know.
Because I think this actually is a good thing in some sense, because that's why I'm saying I think it's a manifestation of some of the underlying problems in society, because you do have actually probably a lot of people from underrepresented backgrounds and also under like poorer backgrounds who are at these universities, because again there has been a very concerted effort to get more people like that.
According to the New York Times, as of July of last year, students in the top 1% of wealth are 5 times as likely to attend an Ivy college as anyone below that.
But what's the proportion, I guess, that you know, of the demographics?
Yeah.
And all my point here is, I'm not saying that the majority at these at Ivy Leagues, especially, aren't privileged and bourgeois, et cetera. You know, probably have parents that are wealthy. According
to this, between 70 and 77% have parents in the top 1% of earners.
Well, and I was just going to say that I think it's more than in the past that are at these universities. Like, I think it's
more wealthy students than in the past.
Fewer wealthy students.
Fewer wealthy students, yeah. Yeah, maybe.
Because like Harvard was talking about decreasing, I don't know. Anyway,
but the thing is, there's this other trap that we get into of just because somebody is black doesn't mean their family's poor. Because there's this other, this is just anecdotal, but there's somebody who just came out with a book about this, and he has a crazy story growing up in foster care and whatever. He got to, I think it was Yale or was it Columbia? I don't remember. This was in 2015 when there was some debacle about Halloween costumes, and students were all like throwing fits and screaming and crying on the quad, feeling unsafe. And he said he remembered talking to a bunch of black and Hispanic students whose parents were all CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, screaming and crying about feeling unsafe. And he's just like, he just had no idea what this was and where it was coming from.
Yes, no, of course. Yeah. Race and class are not always associated.
Right. I mean, they can be. And broadly, I think that there are trends and things like that. But I think even at places like the Ivies, we're still talking about a vast minority of the population. And so even if they have, they're taking in more black students, they're still privileging. They're still more likely. I don't know if they're doing it on purpose. They're still more likely to take wealthy black students too.
I just want to push, though, what I'm saying here is that there's a larger proportion of, I think, poorer students at these universities.
Maybe.
For good reason, because I think this has been a good thing that they've been trying to do. But yeah, I mean, I don't even know what point I'm making anymore. Because ultimately, I agree with you that most of the people are from the bourgeois class, as Marx would describe them.
I just like when I meet people who I would think Marx would call like real proletariat people. Those people are not going to Ivy League colleges.
Right.
Those people aren't even going to big state schools.
Well, and they're also not people that are reading about Marx. They generally don't like Marx.
Right, exactly.
Which is funny.
Although some of them are into their unions. I mean, there's plenty of like auto union people and like trade union people who would probably be basically of the proletariat class.
Yeah. I guess I don't remember why we got on this, but like I wasn't saying that. Oh, did I say that it was the proletariat that was?
No, I said that the students at universities aren't really proletariat. It's like different levels of bourgeois, maybe. And then I said it was more like feudalism, because to me it's like oligarchs and lords or knights or something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's always tough because I mean, ultimately, probably a lot of. Okay, I think we can kind of agree on one thing here, that his idea that class would ever go away, I think we both disagree with that. Like, I don't see I don't see a scenario where people aren't going to try to put themselves into some kind of hierarchy.
I agree.
Which is what class is, essentially.
I guess. I mean, I think class probably has a specific meaning, a type of hierarchy.
Yeah, social hierarchy.
Like, class is not the same as, like, a predator-prey hierarchy or a grade distribution. Like, there's infinite numbers of types of hierarchies.
Right. But I guess what I'm getting at is I feel like this is maybe another distillation of a fundamental point between like a capitalist view, I guess, and a socialist view, or I guess in this case, a Marxist view.
Right.
It seems like Marx believes that you could have a place where there's no hierarchy in a social setting.
Right. Marx does not take hierarchy as a natural phenomenon.
Yeah, and I don't see that.
Right. Well, because you engage in science, which is like built on hierarchy.
Yeah. But it's not to say that hierarchy can't be abused, and there's
Of course.
Yeah.
This is my whole thing. Is in Ancapistan, there's nobody saying that there aren't bad people and there aren't abuses.
And Capistan is a contradiction in and of itself, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
That's funny, though. Did you make that up?
No, I didn't.
Oh.
I wish, but no.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that hierarchy is unavoidable.
Yeah.
I think that class, I don't know, because it doesn't matter. I agree.
Okay. Good.
I'll stop.
Finally. Well, I'll see you tomorrow, man.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do the next two for next time. Is it enough? I feel like the next two aren't as...
I thought there was only 4 total.
Yeah, we did 2 for today, right?
But I was saying maybe we do 3 and then if we want to do 3, I guess if we only want to do 2 episodes on this, we do the next 2. But if we want to do... So that the next one, yeah, I mean, I guess
I think
not that much
one of them isn't enough. I feel like if we're going to do... We should do both, probably.
Yeah, you're right. I'm looking at it. It's only like 20 pages.
Yeah.
Okay.
We
All
could
right.
do... Or we do one of them, and then we do the fascist one, which is only like 10 pages.
I like that idea. So that's Mussolini, right?
Yeah. So, like 80 years later or something. But
Yeah. I'd be down.
yeah.
Cool.
But it's another manifesto. So
Yeah.
and then we do Unabomber. Ted Kaczynski.
We'll do all the manifestos.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, this was a long one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna.
It's
cut
not
some
our
out,
longest though. I don't think. We're at an hour 25.
Oh yeah, I mean last episode was the longest, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Well, so we got our 2 shows tomorrow. I'm assuming everybody has made it this far.
Yep.
All right. See everybody tomorrow at Mozart's. Tomorrow is May 2nd at Mozart's in Austin, Texas. And then on Friday, May 3rd at Celis Brewery in Austin, Texas.
The year of our Lord 2024.
Right. All right. Goodbye.
See ya.